Good morning, and thank you all for joining us for our Feeding Faith Leaders with Community Fervor webinar series. Today's webinar is entitled Public-Private Funding Resources for Faith-Based Development. My name is Tim Block, Senior Program Director with Enterprise Community Partners, and I have the pleasure of leading Enterprise's Faith-Based Development Initiative in the Southeast. We appreciate all of you taking the time to be here with us today, as it is our pleasure to bring to you these webinars that are designed to be a combination of both high-level and deep dive trainings that help participants like yourselves understand the basics of developing housing and other community facilities that can serve congregations and community members. Before we begin today's webinar, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. We ask that you please use the Q&A feature and not the chat when asking questions for our presenters. The chat feature can be used to interact and engage with fellow participants. Shortly following the webinar, we'll be making available the recording, presenters' bios, and presentation slides, and a post-webinar survey via email to all participants and placing them on the resource page of Enterprise's website as well. With that, let's begin today's webinar. We have several presenters lined up that represent organizations from both the public and private sectors who are eager to talk about resources available to help fund and attract development partners for faith-based affordable housing and community facility projects. Although most of the presenters are from Atlanta or Georgia-focused entities, the resources and topics that they'll be discussing you'll find can be similar in nature to those available in local jurisdictions and communities across the country. Because we have 5 presenters in only 1 hour, I will quickly introduce them by their name and the organization they represent. As I mentioned earlier, each of their full bios will be made available via email shortly after the webinar. The presenters will have 8 to 10 minutes to make their presentations, and we'll save 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. First up, we'll hear from our public sector partners, Anita Algood, Vice President, Single Family and Homeownership Opportunities with Invest Atlanta, then Chanel Zeisel, Assistant Director of Housing and Community Development with the City of Atlanta, followed by Ryan Fleming, Director of Office of Housing Finance with the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. Then we'll have presentations from our private sector partners, Sharon Bollers, Director of Lending with Enterprise Community Loan Fund, and Ashani Omar, Executive Director of the Atlanta Affordable Housing Fund. I think we're in store for a great conversation this morning, and we are thankful that these folks are willing to share information about their organization's programs, initiatives, and resources with us. Anita, I'll now turn it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you so much. Let me get my presentation up and going. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, awesome. All right, thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about incentives provided by Invest Atlanta. I really always like to start with regards to who is Invest Atlanta. I can't tell you how many times I'm out in the public and I ask how many people have heard of Invest Atlanta, and there are many people that have not. And so Invest Atlanta is the Economic Development Authority for the City of Atlanta. And essentially our job is to grow the economy, create vibrant communities, and create prosperity for all Atlantans. Our agency is very unique in that it has 2 sides of the house, an economic development arm, as well as a community development arm. And so, as you can see, that economic development arm is responsible for business attraction, small business retention and expansion, entrepreneurship and innovation, as well as creative industries. And the community development arm is what we're talking about today. And that side of the house is responsible for housing initiatives, commercial corridor development, tax allocation district management, and neighborhood revitalization. And I'll get into that TAD information in a little bit, but both sides of the house all working towards economic prosperity. And I always like to start with that because people are really unaware of all that Invest Atlanta is responsible for in the city of Atlanta. So let's talk about these developer incentives. That's why we're here, because the community development side of the house is responsible for managing incentives for development in the city of Atlanta. And so there are at least 6 different incentives that are available. Tax exempt bonds is one of them, and those funds are available annually at a below market interest that can go up to 100% financing and can be leveraged with the 4% LITEX. It requires 15 to 30 year affordability on the project, and it requires that 20% of the units are available at 50% of the area median income, or 40% of the units available at 60% of the area median income. And then it allows for 15% market rate units. And so, the goal obviously is that these incentives are available to create affordable housing. So with every incentive, there will be some type of affordable housing or affordable component required. That is, that is a requirement for the benefit of utilizing any funds that come out of Invest Atlanta for housing development. There will have to be an affordable component. And so housing opportunity bonds is another great option. So some of you may have heard that the city of Atlanta did a $100 million housing opportunity bond earlier this year. And that created funds that will serve 6, 7, 8 different programs that will come out of Invest Atlanta, that Invest Atlanta will administer, programs that Invest Atlanta will administer. And the multifamily program is one of those. And so multifamily would be apartment complex, senior housing facilities, things like that is what a multifamily project would look like. And those funds are provided in the form of a second mortgage, up to a 30-year term with really low interest rates. Our interest rates will be lower than any traditional financing tool that is out there. A minimum of 15-year affordability period. And again, 20% of the units in the project will need to be at 60% of area median income or below. And so I won't go through all of these, but we have lease purchase bonds. On the next slide, we also have the Beltline Affordable Housing Trust Fund that was also created to help to finance affordable housing in the Beltline overlay area and the Beltline TAD. Those funds have not been available. They have been kind of expended, but early next year, we should see that trust fund be refunded with additional funds that will be available. What you will also know about our funds is that most of our funds will be provided in the form of gap financing. We will never be responsible for 100% of the financing for any project. Our funds are generally going to come into play second behind a senior financer, but whenever there are public dollars infused into a project, that gives a senior financing partner a little bit more confidence in the project. If the city is willing to put funding into a project, then a bank is going to feel a lot more confident. And so you also see housing opportunity bonds will fund single family projects as well. Single family projects are going to be those single family homes for sale, so subdivisions, townhomes, condo development. And then the Vine City Trust Fund is going to be used in a neighborhood specific area, which includes Vine City and English Avenue. There are not many of those dollars left available, but it was created with philanthropic dollars to spur development in the Vine City and English Avenue neighborhoods. And then Invest Atlanta is also responsible responsible for the City of Atlanta tax allocation districts. And so the backstory is that tax allocation districts were created to kind of spur and catalyze investment in underserved and blighted areas. Those funds are essentially incremental tax increases from property taxes. A percentage of those tax increments are set aside for the use of redevelopment for the City of Atlanta. And Invest Atlanta is the agency that manages the funds that come out of the tax allocation district. So we're responsible for creating programs and implementing programs with the TAD funds. And so TAD funds can be used for a number of things: large scale development, redevelopment of existing stock, community organization support, and infrastructure improvements. And so currently there have been 10 TADs created. Not all of them are created equally. Not all of them have funds. And so the funded TADs currently are West Side, East Side, Atlanta Beltline, and the Perry Bolton TAD. Those are the TADs that currently have funding available and programs that can be taken advantage of if and when your project falls inside one of these tax allocation districts. And we use the City of Atlanta GIS system to determine whether or not your project is within a TAD and can utilize, those funds. And so one of the last things I want to talk about is just community engagement requirements. If you are seeking any funding from Invest Atlanta outside of our small business improvement grants, it requires that you go through a community engagement process. Invest Atlanta is very dedicated to the community and wants to ensure that any projects that we are going to fund, that the community is well aware of and has had an opportunity to provide feedback. And so with your application for funding, we're going to require that you have a NPU letter that indicates you have presented to the NPU and they have provided their feedback either in support, opposition, or maybe there are some conditions that they would like you to consider in your project before providing an approval. And then lastly, just wanted to kind of show what the timeline for getting our funds looks like. And I won't go into detail. You will get this slide, and we, as a community development team, are available to discuss further at any time. And I know that I'm over my time, so let me stop talking.
Perfect. Perfect, Anita. You're right on time, maybe 30 seconds over. We appreciate it. And there were a couple questions for you. I just want to remind everyone that we will hold questions to the end and then take all the questions at one time for our presenters. Next up, we have Chanel Zeisel from the City of Atlanta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chanel Zeisel. I am the Assistant Director for Housing and Community Development here at the in the Department of City Planning. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. All right, can you see my screen? Yes, okay, yes. Great. Wonderful. So first of all, let me say it's great to see everyone here and see that you're interested in kind of advancing this work and learning how to activate your assets. And I just want to first of all kind of contextualize. So we see ourselves here at City Planning as really playing a role in connecting with you and the public, but also connecting you with a lot of quasi public-private stakeholders. So these are some of our partners that we work really closely with here in Atlanta. And a lot of what you're going to see in this presentation today came out of really long-term conversations that we've been having with them about how do we better align our resources to start to see the outcomes that we want to see in Atlanta related to housing and affordability and equity, because that's the mission really of our department. So when thinking about opportunities for us to work with faith-based developers today, I kind of met with my team and I said, what are the things that we can offer? Because again, Invest Atlanta, as Anita just explained, has this really specific kind of menu of tools related to financing. And we here at the Department of City Planning, we view our role again as helping you think kind of holistically about before you even get to the point where you can apply for financing, you need to have a project. So you need to figure out, hey, I have some land or I have some equity. I want to do something in my community, but maybe I don't know what or how. We are kind of here to assist with not only at the front end of that process, but also during that process, which includes things like building and permitting and so forth. And also when it comes to thinking about complementary uses. So those are things like urban agriculture, I think is what I'm going to touch on today, but also continuing to have this relationship through education in the future. So I'm going to touch on 5 areas that I think are points of intersection that we can be helpful. And then of course, we are always open to, we just want to hear from you if there's anything else that we can help with. So the first one is portfolio evaluation. I think that what we have seen in the past is that there are faith-based organizations that might actually have access to land, but perhaps not have the equity to develop it or even begin to figure out how to develop it. And then also lack portfolio knowledge. So those are kind of like the 2 challenges we've identified. And what I mean by portfolio knowledge is I may have a piece of land that's been used in the same way for the past 100 years. There may be other uses for it, but I'm not really sure what else is going on. Is the city going to build a new park here? Is there transit coming to my neighborhood? Are there other plans that I could coordinate and align with? We want to be a source of guidance there for you in those types of decisions. One of the things that we as a city are pursuing with our own land holdings as an example is exploring what they are worth and what they could do. So a lot of times what public agencies and cities do is we kind of, we have our book value for our land and we say, oh, well, that's a parking lot, right? And that's what it is. But we know that that's not the case. There's a lot of upside that can be unlocked if we analyze our assets. And one of those strategies to do so is called asset mapping, which the city is engaging in. So if there's anyone who's kind of interested in seeing how asset mapping could work for them and wants to learn more about it, just reach out to me. The reason why we want to do asset mapping is because, again, if you are a landholder, you have an opportunity to create value on your land that may not exist currently. And this is really just a simple example of an idea. You might have a parking lot, like I said, and you might want to add more parking there. Not that I support parking, this is just an example. But we think that a better use could be potentially unlocking the areas above it and having a multi-use facility. So it's both generating revenue, it's creating housing, it's satisfying the existing need, and it's doing all of that on land that exists now, incorporating the value that previously was not being acknowledged. This is an example of a library and senior housing development in another state. But I just wanted to put a picture up here to show you that this is a great way to show how, the public and there can be public-private partnership opportunities to think creatively about how you can, co-locate certain functions in a community. So, just food for thought there. So what's the tool to help everyone do this? Obviously, doing asset mapping is interesting and important, but once you've identified a site, what happens next? So this is kind of that gap between, okay, I know I want to move forward in this direction and I know Anita has money for me, but how do I get there? So we actually are launching something called a Housing Innovation Lab. So that's going to be staffed by a team of people with real estate finance expertise, architectural and design experience. And really their job is going to be to help you and our public agencies think through how we can activate our land. And this really came out of this public land conversation that we've been having with these other agencies. So I want to offer this team to you as a resource for us to help you think through what can we access, how might we be able to finance this, what kinds of designs would be permissible under current zoning, all of those really important upfront questions. One of the things that I think is really important for everyone to think about when you are the landholder is what are your development principles? What do you want to prioritize? I'm just putting this here as an example. These are our priorities. Everyone has different priorities, but I think that when we think about developing land, you really want to look at maintaining control. There's been a lot of deals that I've seen that involve disposition, which don't necessarily benefit the the landholder or the organization in the long term. Land is an extremely valuable asset. It's once you let it go, it's very hard to get it back. So that's really one of our main principles that we want to help folks preserve. The third area where I think that folks can jump in is something called a qualified administrator. And so what a qualified administrator is they basically act as the steward for home ownership opportunities. And what I mean by that is the simplest example would be a land trust, right? So the city, we have public land that we want to become permanently affordable through the land trust model. But the land trust, you know, the Atlanta Land Trust, the Community Land Trust is a great organization. They are focused, you know, on the Beltline area and some other areas. We want to see that model grow. So we think that faith-based organizations, nonprofits are excellent candidates to become partners with us. And what that partnership means is essentially we would give the land to this organization and they would administer long-term leases with folks who qualify on an income basis to own that home. So this is a really interesting model. If you want more information, again, just reach out to me. Another area of intersection is urban agriculture. So Atlanta is extremely green. If you have looked around, things grow very easily here, and it's really a gift to us. And it's also one that's very community based. So we currently have a program called Atlanta, and you can check it out down at that URL at the bottom of the page. And we have a whole team that's really devoted to helping folks think about how can you activate your land? How can you grow food for your community? How can you create programs that get folks more in touch with the land and the environment? And how can you also build those things into developments? So again, thinking about things holistically. Lastly, I want to recommend to faith-based organizations on this call that y'all create space for us to come. So similar to how we're sharing space right now and able to talk to you about these resources, we want to talk to your congregations about the opportunities that exist from them. And that's everything from, you know, talking about, oh, you know, unless Atlanta has DPA opportunities, we at the city might have a tax exemption program that could help for homeowners. There might be other programs to help folks age in place or sort out heirs property issues. These are all things that, you know, I think that folks have interest in, and it's a really great place for us to meet. We are seeking invitations. So lastly, anything that your community wants to see, like, I want to have that conversation because we're very kind of dialed into what we do. And I think we all stay in our lanes and we are trying to think holistically about how to be that convener for you. And sometimes what it takes is you coming to me and saying, hey, Chanel, I have a problem, or I want to do this and I don't know where to start. And it's like, great, like, let us be your thought partner. Let us help you. We are here as a resource and we're here to serve. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chanel. Appreciate it. We do have one additional public sector presenter, and his name is Ryan Fleming from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, but he hasn't joined us yet. He did indicate he would be a little bit late. So we are going to move forward with hearing from Sharon Bollers, who is on the private resource side, and she's the Director of Lending for Enterprise Community Loan Fund. Sharon, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you. And I will take this opportunity to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? All right, great, thank you. So yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Bollers, and I am the Director of Lending for the Washington, D.C. and Ohio markets for Enterprise Community Loan Fund, the the Community Development Finance Institution, or CDFI, within the broader Enterprise family. And so as you've heard so far this morning, there are numerous lenders and funders throughout the development process. And some of those are both within and external to Enterprise. So I'm going to start by first explaining what is the CDFI and what type of lending we provide. A Community Development Finance Institution, or CDFI, CDFIs are in short mission-based lenders. And so they focus on what are called or known as low-income or low-wealth communities, or low-income households. And CDFIs typically have specific areas of focus, and typically those would include affordable housing, small business development, or neighborhood revitalization. So at Enterprise Community Loan Fund, we work with mission-aligned organizations to support low and moderate income families. And we do this by delivering innovative financial products, financing the acquisition, development, and preservation of affordable housing, as well as supporting communities through access to quality, affordable healthcare, high quality education, and so forth, just to name a few. And so just a little bit about our size and scope. We have over 400 million assets under management, over 200 million loans outstanding. And since our inception, we've closed over 2,000 loans. We've helped with the construction of over 123,000 units, as well as been a part of over 20 billion in total development costs. So again, a little bit about the loan fund. So in terms of how to compare us to other areas, funders within that development cycle, as a CDFI, we're typically what we call early stage capital. And so I'll just talk a little bit about the financing that we provide. So first you'd have acquisition loans, and these are available for both land acquisition as well as building acquisition. We also provide pre-development loans, and these support the project prior to when you would close on your construction financing. So typically you would have a pre-development loan to help cover costs such as third-party due diligence, and these include things like your appraisals, environmental studies, market studies and such, your architectural and engineering, your application for funding sources, consultant fees, you know, and the list kind of goes on. We also provide construction or rehab loans, and these are available to finance construction projects, as well as pay for necessary rehab work needed to address critical repairs for operating properties. We have our bridge and equity bridge loans. These can be used to bridge the equity payments from low-income housing tax credits or LIHTC or historic tax credits into projects. So essentially, we provide a loan for the construction of the project until the project actually receives the equity payments from the investor. And we also have our mini perm loans, and these are our amortizing loans to operating properties with shorter terms than you would typically find from a perm lender. So terms that are about 5 to 7 years or so forth. So just a little bit again about the types of projects that we fund. So as a mission-based lender, we focus on affordable housing, primarily affordable multifamily, rental and supportive housing. We would typically lend to both nonprofit and for-profit borrowers. Our terms are typically 2 years with the option for extension, and we can go longer when necessary. Again, our mini perms can go up to 7 years. And our standard pre-development and acquisition loans are interest only, typically with a built-in interest reserve. And when it comes to our acquisition loans, we provide a loan to value of about 60% for unimproved or non-operating properties, and then 80% loan to value for operating properties. And so we're typically a secured lender. So there would be collateral supporting these. And then just a note. So everything that I share with you today is what we call our typical or policy lending. And so, but basically terms are determined on a project by project basis. So oftentimes we can go higher LTV or terms or so forth, all depending on what the specific project needs are. And so just a little background. So from my work in the DC region, I have gotten the opportunity to work with a few houses of worship looking to develop excess parcels of land into affordable housing. And so from my experience, the primary ways in which houses of worship have leveraged our funding are in really two primary paths. The first is for acquisition, and in most cases, these are vacant parcels of land, or to refinance that's already existing on the property. that the house of worship may own. So through that entitlement process, oftentimes, depending on where you are, the rezoning can actually take several years. And in that time, it may become necessary to actually refinance the current loan out of from the current lender. And this can actually give you an opportunity because it can give you the ability to actually go take out a bigger loan to start moving through the pre-development process, because as you move through that entitlement process, the value of the land is often appreciated through that. And then second ways, we've definitely been able, House of Worship been able to leverage our financing really is in the pre-development. And again, this is once you've found your development partner, you've determined that it's a viable project and you're ready to move forward with the project. And again, in this case, you can borrow against that equity that often has been developed or has been gained through the entitlements or zoning or process that was previously done. So that's about it for me. And so I know we're taking questions later, so I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Great presentation. Ryan Fleming has joined us, but I think since we're already started talking about the private sector and the resources that they have, we'll go ahead and have Ashani Omar present, and then we'll have Ryan back clean up for us. Ashani?
All right. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. I am now sharing my screen. Does everyone see it?
Yes, see it.
Okay,
It's coming up a little bit bigger. Let's see. Yep, perfect.
wonderful. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ashani Omar. I am the founding executive director of the Atlanta Affordable Housing Fund. It's been great to hear a lot of our colleagues talk today. The Atlanta Affordable Housing Fund is actually only about 2 years old. We launched back in January of 2020, and we are a social impact fund driven by private sector partners. And really, we focus on aggregating private capital to bring to affordable housing opportunities. We have spent the past, I would say, almost 18 months, about 16 months, raising capital. We're excited to hopefully close our fund by the end of this year. And the goal is to raise $20 million that we will deploy into low-cost, into affordable housing projects in the form of low-cost capital. To date, we have invested in about 4 projects across the 5-county metro area, and have probably about another 5 or 6 projects we're actively working on right now. When we the way that we approach this work at the Atlanta Affordable Housing Fund is really through the lens of the role that housing plays in being foundational and critical to really chart the paths of success for pretty much every other element of families and individuals' lives. So we see it being key to economic mobility. We see it being key to increased and stronger educational outcomes, as well as improved health outcomes. And in terms of our objectives within the fund, primarily what we have really focused on in this work is really bringing more private partners to this conversation. Atlanta has historically been a city known for its real estate leadership and its ability to really sort of bring together leaders within the space. So many of our partners and stakeholders are seasoned real estate professionals that are able to bring their expertise to this conversation as we partner with emerging developers. We have really been intentional about our support and providing technical expertise to Black developers here in Atlanta. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is unclog those bottlenecks. It's really great to hear our partners from both Enterprise and Invest Atlanta on the phone. We've actually worked on deals in the past with Invest Atlanta where we all sort of come to the capital stack, and ultimately it helps to lower the cost of capital to the borrower. So it's been a really unique, it feels almost like a science project, only it's not a lot of science in it, but you know, we're really sort of testing this model with the intention of scaling and launching a larger fund next year. So just to tell you a little bit about our underwriting approach, which is quite similar to a lot of what has already been mentioned by Enterprise, we really focus on providing construction, acquisition, rehab, bridge financing to developers. We've done a little bit of work and we've been in conversations regarding pre-development, but the fund that will be planning to launch next year in partnership with the Community Foundation will have a broader focus on pre-development funds. We look for some of the typical things you find you know, in the underwriting process with respect to the experience that the project sponsor or developer brings, making sure the project is feasible. We do like to see some type of equity or grants as a part of the capital stack. And we actually look for a what we call a but-for test. We typically will have a guiding point of our dollars representing about up to 25,000 on a per unit basis of the investment that goes into the capital stack. And as a way to help leverage those dollars, but we also want to see other partners at the table. We want to make sure that the project is prioritizing longevity of affordability. We also like to see deeper affordability. And we also want to make sure that this is done in conjunction with everything else that might be happening within the fabric of a neighborhood, making sure that there's a proximity of uses that will really help make sure families and individuals are able to thrive. And we also encourage partnerships with other service providers who may be locally based. So I wanted to just quickly highlight a couple of options. We have not had the privilege of working with the House of Worship as of yet, but we have worked with a couple of nonprofit developers. We also work with private developers who are mission driven and focused on bringing affordable housing to our region. The first project I wanted to share is a partnership we were engaged in with a national nonprofit called Community Solutions. In fact, Bellwether Enterprise was the senior lender on that particular project, and we provided a second mortgage. And there are local dollars through Partners for Home that our developers are able to access when they're providing permanent supportive housing. So 50% of the units in this project, which was a 132 unit project, was able to take advantage of like a $2.4 million grant to support formerly homeless veterans. And then the remainder of the units were naturally occurring affordable housing. We were also able to work with a local property manager that we connected Community Solutions to that is providing supportive services for all of the residents. And then the next project that I wanted to highlight is actually a single-family preservation initiative that we were able to partner with Invest Atlanta on. This is a local nonprofit, the Atlanta Neighborhood Development Partnership, that was looking to expand their single-family rental portfolio. This particular transaction was supporting about 63 units, I think, in total. Initially, they anticipated about 50 units. But I think because of the dollars they were able to leverage, not only with a senior lender, but our dollars that provided sort of the second tier of financing, in Invest Atlanta's dollars, they were able to actually acquire those properties and then launch a greater effort and capital campaign to allow them to do similar work in more targeted areas across our region. So in this case, there were properties they were acquiring that were already occupied, and they were able to prevent voucher holders from being displaced. So what we enjoy about our projects and the investments that we engage in is we can really bring flexibility to each project. You know, we're very nimble in how we approach this work. So we're really looking to sort of fill in those gaps where they are needed. And I will stop there and look
Thanks,
forward to questions.
Johnny.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. We will have our final presenter, Ryan Fleming from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. Ryan, I'll turn it over to you, and then hopefully we'll have some time to answer the questions that have come in so far.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear you okay?
All right. I apologize for being late, everybody. I was on a public hearing for a policy document of which we will talk about later in these slides. But I am Ryan Fleming. I am the Director of the Office of Housing Finance for the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And at Georgia DCA, let's slide change. We want to help build strong, vibrant communities, and one part of that umbrella is quality affordable housing. And if you are talking about quality affordable housing in the country or the state of Georgia, it really is the housing tax credit program, which was enacted in 1986.
Hey, Ryan, I'm not sure if you were sharing, are you want to show your slides? Because we don't see your slides if you're trying to share your slides.
Let's see here. Are they showing up now? And
Here we go.
Perfect.
And it's also in presenter mode and not presentation mode. So we can see the next slide.
Let's see.
Yeah,
Oh. Let's see. Well, we might have to go with
Brian,
this.
if you just click slideshow, start from the beginning, it should no, go back up to the top.
Uh-huh.
Slideshow over to the right.
Let's see, it's being covered a little bit.
Mid-screen slideshow.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then start from the beginning over there to the left. There you
perfect.
go. That should put your presentation in.
Maybe.
did you hit it?
Did you hit it?
Yep, we did. Here, let me not share it for a second. Let's go share.
Brian, if you go down to the bottom, go all the way down to the bottom of your screen, click there, click right there.
That's what it did last time, so I'm not sure.
Well, if you want to go back to what you did before where we could see the next slide, that's fine.
Give me 1 second here. I apologize here. Is that showing up now?
See the slides, but they're still, I think you can go either from this way or the way that you did it before. We see the slides, it's just not in full presentation mode.
Yeah, I'm clicking full presentation mode for whatever reason. It's just
Okay.
it's not coming up with it. So
All right, how about you just go from there? Just
I can just zoom in a little bit. So
yeah, that's fine.
all right. Well, I apologize about that. But all right. At the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, we issue housing tax credits, and housing tax credits are the main producer of multifamily affordable housing in the state of Georgia and the United States. Who do we serve? This is a good way of saying everybody, but seniors living on independent living, fixed incomes, Georgia working families, and individuals with disabilities. I just want to mention it, but we won't have enough time today to go into it. That we have both 9% and 4% housing tax credits. And the main difference between those is 4% housing tax credits utilize tax exempt bonds, of which you would go to Invest Atlanta if you were in the city of Atlanta doing that type of development. Just want to make sure, are you all seeing the slides change too right now?
Yes, we can see the slides.
All right, perfect. This kind of diagram just lets you know how housing tax credits flow from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs to the developer. So DCA issues tax credits. The developer sells these tax credits to investors who then put cash into multifamily affordable housing. So the developer might sell $1 million in tax credits. The investor is able to reduce their income tax liability by $1 million. In return, they're going to pay the developer for that income tax reduction $900,000 in cash, and that cash is going to go into the affordable housing, which keeps debt very low on the property and rents affordable. This breakout right here is just a very simple kind of capital stack to show you what a typical market rate development looks like. You'll have 20% equity, 80% debt, and in the housing tax credit world, that capital stack is flipped. So our equity is 80% of the development cost, and our debt is 20%. So that low amount of debt allows us to keep rents affordable on the property. And since we are the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, we serve everybody throughout the state. So that's rural, that's the city of Atlanta, and everybody in between. So just want to give everyone a couple of quick examples of developments of which we have funded previously. This is Summer Breeze Park in Ringgold, Georgia. We've got Abbey Lane Park in Chatsworth, Georgia. Walton Ridge Apartments in Marietta. We've got Freedom Heights in Valdosta. We've got Columbus Commons in Columbus, and we have deals in Atlanta every year as well. This link right here is a housing tax credit affordable property map. It's very interactive. You can go search within the city of Atlanta to see which development is closest to you. For housing tax credits, we have two kinds of funding tracks. One is 9% credits, and the second is 4% credits. 9% credits, we take in applications of May of each year, and we get anywhere between 60 to 90 applications every year, and we're able to fund typically year 32 to 38 developments. Those are mainly new construction, so developers are finding vacant pieces of land and then building anywhere from 60 to 80 units on. The second funding track is 4% housing tax credits, and the main difference there is developers are utilizing tax exempt bonds and housing tax credits as part of the development process. Our applications on the 4% side are currently on hold because we have way more applications for demand than we are able to supply right now. So we're hoping to open up those applications at the very end of 2022, but we will see if that happens. Another main difference between 9% and 4% housing tax credits in Georgia is while 9% are mainly new construction, 4% we try to strike a delicate balance between 50% new construction, 50% rehab. And 4% deals are typically larger as well. Our main policy document, of which we were having the public hearing on a little bit earlier, is our qualified allocation plan. And we publish this document every year. We have lots of listening sessions and public hearings, and then we get it formally adopted by the DCA board, and then the governor signs it each year. And there's three main sections to the qualified allocation plan. There is a core section, which is basically how DCA administers the housing tax credit program. There is a threshold section, which is criteria which every development has to meet. So it has to be financially feasible. It has to meet environmental requirements. It has to meet the state's construction quality standards, etc. And then there's scoring. Because we get more applications than we have money for every year, we have to differentiate between a winning development and a losing development. So I want to focus in on scoring for everyone listening into this discussion. There are a number of sections in the QAP scoring section which helps determine who wins and who doesn't. For the groups listening on this call, I want to focus in on kind of utilize your local partnerships. If you want a vacant piece of land developed, there is money for applications or points for applications if you can get local funding deals. So If you have partnerships with the city of Atlanta, Invest Atlanta, Atlanta Housing Authority, those will make those developments more favorable on a point-spent basis. Also, if it's located near amenities, transportation options, or if there's rental assistance on the unit. And if you are thinking about a vacant piece of land of which you own and you want to get developed, there are a couple of considerations which we should all be thinking about. One is every housing tax credit application must be zoned for multifamily use at the time of application. So if you have a parcel which you're wanting developed, check to make sure it is zoned properly. If not, you have to go through the process. Second is you want to look at your density, which you can get on your parcel. If you have 2 acres of land and the density maximum is 10 units per acre, you only get 20 units on that. For a 9% or a 4% application, at minimum, you're going to need probably 50 to 75 units. So you're going to want to make sure, based off of the acreage and the density requirements of that piece of land, you're going to be able to get enough units on the property to attract development to that location. Second is the cost of land. Cost of land is very high in the city of Atlanta, and it's increasing every year. So an attractive way to get a developer to develop on a vacant piece of land is to ground lease it to them for a nominal cost. So that takes out that cost from the transaction. Another benefit of that is you, as the landowner, will retain ownership and will have rights to that land moving forward. So that is totally allowable under the housing tax credit application. You can sell a piece of land, or you can ground lease it and retain ownership and have control over the site moving forward as well. And the third kind of major point I wanted to highlight is it's important to find a development partner. There's a link in this slide, which we have year over year, who applies for funding, who is awarded. It's going to break out who applied for funding where the deals were awarded, whether or not they're a nonprofit, for-profit, if they're a community housing development organization. You'll be able to see, based off who is awarded in your area year over year, who might be the best point of contacts to reach out to. Also know going into it, the application process can take 18 to 24 months from when a developer might reach out to you about wanting to develop your land, getting an application together, submitting it to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, and then the final announcement of awards. And then development of multifamily real estate will take on average 2 years plus. And underneath the housing tax credit program, there is 30 years of compliance. So there is a 30-year period of which DCA will be inspecting the property and making sure that your development partner is abiding by all the promises in their application and the housing tax credit program. So those are all the slides I have. Apologize that we were not able to share the full screen, but hopefully we can still follow along.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. We have a few minutes. We're a little bit behind schedule. We have a few questions that came in. Let's try to get through as many questions as we can. The first question is for Anita, and it is, are tax allocation districts funded with tax increment financing?
Yes, so that's correct. The increment creates the funding that is used, that we administer programs. So there's a percentage of tax increment that goes into the pot, and then we will create programs and administer funds. Administer programs using those funds.
Absolutely. And the next question is also for you, Anita, and it's from Evan Gerber. Are TADs authorized by the state of Georgia or the city of Atlanta?
City of Atlanta.
Thank you. The next question is for Chanel. It's from Ian Jones. For faith-based properties, who owns the completed project and therefore net cash flow and equity buildup?
I mean, that's really up to you, Ian, how you want to structure that. And that's something that we can help you think through. When I was talking about those principles of development that we are utilizing, though, we are emphasizing retaining ownership of the land, and therefore that leads us to a ground lease model for the developments we're envisioning.
Thank you, Chanel. The next question is for Sharon, and it's from Evan Gerber. He said, what is the typical structure you are seeing between developers and faith-based partners, ground leases or joint ventures or fee-based?
I think what I've seen mostly has just been joint ventures. To Chanel's point, in that structure, oftentimes that allows the house of worship to retain some kind of ownership and cash flow and so forth throughout the development process and the life of the project. And that's typically structured depending on, you know, your financial strength and capability. A lot of times the development partner will take a larger part of that JV because they're taking on more of the risk, meaning they're providing the guarantees and so forth. So, but I've typically seen a JV.
Awesome. Thank you. And there's one more question for you, Sharon. It says, what is the average affordable housing project loan size of the CDFI, of your CDFI?
Well, and again, that can vary. And again, because we're early stage lenders, we're typically that, you know, acquisition, pre-development and so forth. Our loan size typically goes up to about 8 million, but if something is larger is needed, we would typically do something which is pretty common in the CDFI space, which is we participate. But there, you know, it tends to be that capped about the 8 to 10 size.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. A question for you, Ashani. It says, is the Atlanta Affordable Housing Fund geographic focus the city of Atlanta or Metro Atlanta?
So we're actually the 5-county metro area, which includes Cobb, Clayton, DeKalb, Fulton, and Gwinnett.
Thank you, Shani. Question for you, Ryan. It says, what is the anticipated timing on the 4% application given issues around volume cap?
We are expecting new applications to come in the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023. Reason being is our pipeline still has over $1 billion in bonds associated with it. So we're working through the applications. So development has not stopped. It's just we don't want to take in new applications and have people waiting for 2.5 years plus, trying to hold land, spending pre-development money, all those considerations.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. There's one last question that I see in the Q&A, and it was not pointed at anyone specific. The question is, what limitations are there on using project funds for space used by a religious organization, i.e. either for a daycare or for worship? I don't know if anyone want to take a stab at that one.
I can jump in here. So typically what we've seen, and it all depends on what your ultimate takeout would be. So just, you know, something of note, if you are a house of worship, if, you know, the space that would be used for the congregation or the is not eligible for tax credit. So you'll want to factor that in. But in terms of just overall, it depends on what your ultimate, you know, kind of takeout or funding sources will be. Will kind of determine what and how you can finance that.
Thanks, Sharon. And I think there's one last question in the chat, and it's similar to a question that was posed before about geographic boundaries. Same question for Chanel. Does Invest Atlanta support affordable housing development projects outside of the city proper? And I think that would be for Nita because she's with Invest Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. And the answer is no. Invest Atlanta's jurisdiction is City of Atlanta proper. And so any housing or businesses would have to pay taxes to the City of Atlanta to qualify. That's really the jurisdiction.
Well, thank you. I know we're almost at time. Those are all the questions that I see. So I want to thank Anita, Chanel, Ryan, Sharon, and Ashani so much for your terrific presentations, for accepting my request for support, and for sharing some very informative and helpful information as it relates to funding and other resources to support faith-based development projects. I'm confident our participants learned a great deal this morning. In closing, I want to once again remind participants that Enterprise continues to believe that houses of worship and the faith community can play an important role in addressing the affordable housing crisis by utilizing the undeveloped and or underdeveloped land that they own to provide affordable housing units And we're here to help them figure out the housing development piece through our faith-based development initiative. There continues to be a few different on-ramps as it relates to the FBDI. If you're a house of worship that feels it's further along in the development process, then completing Enterprise's faith-based development initiative organizational assessment / joint venture worksheet might be a good next step for you so that Enterprise and the partners such as the ones that you heard from today that we work with have a better understanding how we might be able to assist you with your project. To get the organizational assessment worksheet, please reach out to me directly at the contact information on the slide. If you're still trying to wrap your head around the development process, then continue to participate in our faith-based development initiative webinar series, maybe right where you need to be right now. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, November 30th, where we will discuss occupancy and ongoing operations, i.e. asset and service management. Thank you again for joining us today and have a blessed rest of the day.